Good morning. Thanks for coming out on a Saturday morning and drinking my coffee for me. And we are so pleased to present this exhibition and to do it in cooperation with the Beckler Museum of Modern Art. I feel very honored that they selected me to represent Lee on their behalf. I find Lee to be just a phenomenal painter and an even more phenomenal human being. She is really quite amazing, and I'm just getting to know her, and I really can't wait to go back up to Massachusetts, mostly just to eat her cooking. So I don't know exactly what she has planned for us. I think she's going to talk to us a little bit about painting and the particular show, and we really want to encourage you all to ask questions. So please do so. I want to recognize John Boyer, director of the Beckler Museum in the back, and thank you again directly, John, for everything you've done to help us make this possible. It's really a wonderful exhibition. Lee, come, dear. Oh, one more thing. I'm holding it and almost forgot. We felt this exhibition was so important that we've documented it with a catalog. And there's a gratis copy for everyone today on the table in the back, so please make sure you take it with you.
Thank you. I'm going to say just a little bit about painting in general, and then I hope you'll ask questions, because that way I won't just blather on, say something that is interesting to you. At the beginning of the Renaissance, Cennino Cennini, who allegedly studied with Giotto, which isn't bad, wrote a craftsman's handbook, and it was a how to be an artist book. And it's still something that I urge you to commit to memory, or if given to tattoos, have it put on your left thigh. It's just one of those references that you always want to go back to. And in that, he said, God created the world, and people didn't behave well. So he said, okay, you're rotten people, so you got to work. That's your punishment. And obviously, all work would not be equal. Some work would be okay, and some work would be really bad. And I've done both kinds. At any rate, he said, at the top of the heap of workers, the people who are the luckiest in terms of the work they get to do are philosophers, poets, and painters. And I've always believed that that was one of the great truths spoken, that we're the lucky ones. It's not easy work, but it's terrific work. And it's hard work. But I can't think of a better way to spend your life. And I'm a great believer in life before death. So I think that you shape your life by what you do. And largely, I think I've been one of the really, really fortunate people in that my years have taken shape around work. Now, in that process, I'm obviously going to think some things are better than other things. And I've kind of made some rules for myself, but they're not rules for other people. But I'll tell you those rules, and then we'll talk. I don't want to do stunts. I don't want to do clever, cute, attention-getting stuff. When I was teaching, I had a student who said, I'm really going to make it be a celebrity. And I said, well, how's that? And he said, I'm going to think of something really outrageous, and it's going to piss Jesse Helm off. And then I'll be on television, and I'll be an artist. Well, the problem with that is that made Jesse Helms the most important esthetician of the 20th century, which I reject. So no stunts. However propitious, however lucrative, no stunts. That lets out a lot of stuff. The other thing is, art is not a commodity. If you're interested in commodities, go to pork bellies. But it's not a commodity. It's serious, and it's about living. And the third thing is, for me, that I don't really believe we're fully human, that we fully become alive, awake to life itself without the arts. So when people say, they have no purpose, or let's cut the budget there, they're just stupid. It's very hard to talk to stupidity, but that's the problem. Because of all the things that we need in this world, it's some introduction, familiarity, appropriation of beauty and truth. And that's what art is still about. It's still about that. So, that basically is all I have to say. Are there questions? Okay, well, we can go eat cake. Yeah. Yes.
Were you always into abstract, or could you tell us a little bit about your own personal history of like going from this to that to landing on this? This work is phenomenal and wonderful. How did you get to this?
Well, I started out just drawing, because I like to draw, and then drawing and painting. And by the time I went to college, I knew that's what I wanted to do. But I didn't really know what it was exactly. I just knew I like the stuff of it. I like the paint. I like the charcoal, all those things. And as I got into classes, I was lucky to have as a painting teacher, John Opper, who was one of the abstract expressionists. He was exiled to North Carolina because he had a wife and children and had to support them by teaching. And he was a very, very good teacher. He was a very serious teacher. And he introduced the whole notion of abstract expressionism, gestural art, action painting, and it was absolutely fascinating for me. And I understood that no mark is without both intellectual and emotional import. And I wanted very much to do it. So I started working that way, in a pretty doctrinaire way, pretty seriously. But there was something about it that bothered me, because I never felt that it was as beautiful as nature. And I just always thought that nature finally was more intriguing, and I'd have to say more real. So I realized I had to do something about thinking about that, and I wanted to do something which was almost forbidden fruit in a way, which was to synthesize nature and abstraction. At this point, let me mention Arthur Dove, who may have been the first abstract painter, and he's certainly a wonderful painter, but he never used the term abstract that I know of. And he talked instead about extrapolation from nature. Well, that makes me love him very much. And that seemed to be a kind of a key, that I wanted to look at nature and believe, however much what I was seeing might be the shadow on the cave wall, that it was some representation or film of reality in the metaphysical sense, big time reality. And that I could not get just by copying nature, but I could learn from it and reconfigure. So that's what happened.
That's excellent. Thank you, that was...
Good. Anything else?
Will you tell us a little bit about sort of your life history and where you were in the 70s and the hiatus away from exhibiting?
Well, I taught, and I liked teaching very much, and I was serious about it and wanted to be a good teacher. So I went to graduate school and studied, and then I was teaching, and early on when I was a sophomore in college, a wonderful art history professor, Elizabeth Jastrow, said to me, she was German, and she was one of Hitler's gifts to America. And she was very confused about what was happening in New York and in the whole abstract expressionist attitude. And one day at a student show, she said, "How will you know if you paint like this? How will you know when you're a painter, when it's good?" Well, that's a very good question. And without really thinking very much and not meaning to be cavalier about it, I said, well, I'll go to New York and Betty Parsons' gallery will show my work and I'll know. And so, I always had in mind that that would happen, and it did. So, that seemed fine, and I liked it, and I liked what was going on and all of that. But in the meantime, in teaching, lots of questions kept coming up. And then I got, for my sins, into administration, where, of course, not only do you have your own questions, but everybody else's. And after a while, I decided that I was on the verge of being very glib and very dreamy at the same time. And that's fine in support of ultimate romanticism, but it wasn't really serious painting. I was drifting off of course. So I decided to go into the wilderness and do some serious thinking. And so I did, and just painted and thought about painting. Went to Greece especially because I had always loved ancient art and classical civilization. And I disliked very much the kind of sloganeering about what's the latest, what's new, what has never been done before, because it was really bullshit. Deep and fragrant. And nobody's going to do anything new. It's like looking for original sin. You just can't find it. So, oh, absolutely. And you may even engage in the search if you desire. But when you look at what people whose names we don't know, and often we don't know very much about them, made as a way of capturing and claiming thought and idea, you ain't going to get better. And the art is always in the process of dying, always. And it's only the action of the human mind, both as appreciator and doer, that brings it back, that revives it. So it seems to me that as a painter, my responsibility is not the search for the new, but rather the validation, the verification of the eternal. And I think there's a real difference. So, yes?
You invoke very, I think, kind of brilliantly Plato and your own Neoplatonism, thinking about validating, in this idea of validating the eternal. How do you not be disappointed if you're a Neoplatonist?
Well, you are. How do you not be disappointed if you're a human being?
How do you make more art under that philosophical pressure?
Well, Marianne Moore said that what a poet should do is praise. And I think that's true. And it's by an act of will, not to get too existentialist here, that you choose to do te deum rather than tedium. And and even if you have to look hard to find the praiseworthy, that's what you really want to, I think, work with. Goodness knows there's enough to lament, and I just don't want to do that. I'd rather find things to be happy about. And if you're not happy, at least acknowledge as good things. So it's choice. Yes?
One of the things I'm always interested in is who artists see their audience. And I suspect that your audience has shifted from what you described as your journey. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think that's true. A lot of people sort of deny that, but it's true. Well, audiences are both real and imaginary. And I think you're always addressing paintings to people you know. They're ghosts in the studio. And I spend a lot of time talking to Giotto and Piero della Francesca. But ideally, I would like for people to be the kind of audience I was once. I'll tell you that. That's the best way. I went to a Diebenkorn show at the Whitney, and it was a gorgeous show, just gorgeous. Now, somebody has to be really, really good to be gorgeous in the Whitney. Because unlike the Melberg Gallery, the Whitney does not always hang shows well. But the Diebenkorn show was just heavenly. And I was meeting a friend, and I went down into their pit, their moat, to have a drink and wait for him to come. And while I was sitting there, all of New York started changing because the sun was going down. And as it went down, the light was slanting, and it was the slanting of the Diebenkorn slant. And I thought, I will never see city space the same way again, because having seen Diebenkorn, I will never see it the same way again. And that's what I think I want to happen with an audience. That having seen painting, there's an intensification and clarification of nature, if that makes sense. Anything else? Yes?
Could you talk to us a little bit about your process? If your work starts from a more perceptual, visual experience or more intuitive?
Okay. I make lots and lots and lots of collages and drawings and small paintings. And I use those almost as notepads or vocabulary cards. And I never copy them in working in the studio on big things. But I think about ideas, and I think about places, and I think about light, and develop a vocabulary that will eventually find its way into the studio. And then I'm blessed with medium, with materials, which I like. I like paint. So beginning with a discussion with paint about, I don't want to say an image or an idea or a subject, but in that realm someplace, I make a painting. Is that okay? Yes.
Question. On a given work, you may combine oil and
Acrylic?
acrylic.
Yeah.
That choice, just the colors or the texture?
Well, acrylic is a wonderful medium in that it's a long fibered molecule, so that you can do this. It doesn't crack or bend or anything. And I think everybody now uses acrylic gesso. And you can put oil over acrylic, but you can't put acrylic over oil. And oil is a tiny little molecule. It's like little dots of molecules that stick together, which is why you see a lot of cracking in oil paintings after a time. I'm likely to work with acrylic first, initially, to develop up to a point. But when I really get to where I'm needing color to come to a certain level of aliveness, I want oil. It's the sensuality of oil and the dependability of the color. The other problem that acrylic has, and I think it's a wonderful medium in lots of ways, is that it doesn't dry true. So you end up spending a lot of time swearing at it. And I mean really seriously swearing. But you have to learn a whole different way of looking at what's going on the canvas in terms of it's going to turn out to be. Because what you put there will not be what it is when it's dry. But with oil, dependable, wonderful oil, it's okay. Yes?
In your work process, when you said you make collages to your pieces, are you the type that of the big canvases, you maybe have 3 or 4 going at one time and move between them, or are you kind of a make a collage, finish a canvas?
No, I have a very messy studio, and I have a zillion things going at once.
Did you just say you only visited painting once?
No, I have a zillion things going on in the studio. So everything is going on at once. Yes?
How conscious is that beginning process when you're making the collages and the drawings?
Well, I think the best example of that is the wall back there with the Roman wall collages. I was in Rome and at the American Academy there. And I spent a lot of time looking at walls in Rome because they're so beautiful. Mm-hmm. And then working on collage idea with that. So it is conscious to a degree, certainly. Or if I'm working on, say, a particular kind of landscape, I'll begin with, well, for instance, in the valley where I live, the Connecticut River Valley, one of the things that you see a lot is the rise of land and then this kind of gentle fall of it. And between the two, between you and that, you'll often see furrows of plowed land or cuts of fields. And so I'll just steal those. Yes?
What advice do you have for a young artist?
The most serious advice I can give anybody in it is, if you can do anything else, do it. Seriously, you know, you should only do art if you can't live without it. If you can't live without it, if you can't make any sense of life without doing it, do it. But and I think without that, you don't really have any claim to it. It's, you know, it's hard work and it's serious business.
Painting and teaching are just parts of your life.
Yeah.
But you're also a cultural historian and a biographer. How does your writing, or how has your writing balanced with your visual arts, and how have they fit each other?
I'm thinking. John, I don't really quite know. They seem okay. I mean, they seem compatible. I think I'd go back to, I'm a reader. And if you read a lot, you probably are also going to write some or be interested in language. And I'm interested in the revelatory power of language, what you can learn from language itself and from specific languages. I've spent in the last several years a lot of time learning Greek because it's like learning language, what language is really about, what it was meant to be. And it just makes you think. And writing is a way of thinking. You know, it's not what students will tell you. Well, I've been thinking and thinking, and I don't have an idea yet. You know, start writing and the idea will take form. And you know, you paint in order to know what you can see. You write in order to know what you can think in that level, I think.
We've touched on Plato, we've touched on Marianne Moore. Can you recall any particular works, either of philosophy or poetry, since you're that third P, a painter, piece of work, that made the biggest difference for you at some point in your life?
Yeah.
And are there any that you'd come back to over and over again?
Wallace Stevens of modern poetry. It just turned my head around altogether. It seemed to answer so succinctly and so melodiously a lot of things that bothered me. He begins by saying that if you're going to write modern poetry, you will find yourself a metaphysician on a stage with an instrument that has only one string. And you'll tweak and twang, hoping to find the one absolutely perfect note that will suffice. Will suffice. You know, it's not going to be everything, but it will suffice. It's that provisional moment of recognition. And then he goes on to say, it can be of anything, a woman combing, a man skating, it doesn't matter. It's getting that perfect sound. And that, you know, that's what it's about, isn't it? Other things have been great too, I mean, but that particular one.
Could you say something about your color choices? Is that a valid? I don't even know about that. Do you ever get the feeling you want to do a cabinet red?
Yeah, well, and I do. You know, this, you know, there's some color variation in here. Recent paintings have been probably more vivid, and part of that I'm going to blame on the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean. But, yeah, but you know, color's an arbitrary choice. But once you've made the initial choice, then it's going to dictate where you go from there, I think. I recently saw a show at the MFA in Boston of Sargent's watercolors. Well, they're just heavenly. I mean, you could just fall into them and lose your life. And part of it is that his use of white, which doesn't even exist in watercolors. You know, he's using the paper. He's playing off the paper in that way. And they're really brilliant. I mean, I think anybody who's serious about painting should go look at those.
Flight to Boston.
After being in the sunlight of the Mediterranean and Greece, how were you able to ever bring yourself back to the light that you'd have in Connecticut or?
Well, I drink a lot and I have an imagination.
Do you eat a lot of chocolate?
Sometimes.
That answers.
But so do you paint with that light in your mind's eye?
Well, I have-
Even though it's not,
Yeah, often I do. Or another light that will come back to me often is the light of the North Carolina Outer Banks. That's a very special light too. Or the light of where I live in the Connecticut River Valley, which is a very Northern European light. And I have a studio that has perfect light, I can't tell you. And Jerald and I were talking last night that it's wonderful to work in daylight. And it's a great luxury and maybe even a necessity. But it's also very nice to see paintings in the washed light of the gallery. You see them in a different way. So that's nice too. But you know, light's what there is. I mean, that's what you see. That's what color is.
which exposure do you get in your studio?
My studio is designed so that one end of it faces east. So I get the morning light there. Then as the sun rises, I get northern light and from high up windows. And as the sun goes over, I get the light from the skylights. And as the sun goes down in the south, or goes around to the south where it's glary, it's against the painting walls behind it, so I don't get that glare. And I had a studio earlier that had an open sliding doors on the south side, and the sun drove me crazy. So when I did this one, I was very careful about the placement of the windows, and it works. The light's almost palpable. And I just go in there and say, this is good. It's better to be alive than not.